here, so I'm going to hit the go live button. And we're live. Hello, everybody in and watching around the YouTube lands. Jeff, do you want to say anything?
Hi, Jeff McKinney. What?
Is Dimitri watching? Hi, Dimitri.
Eccles, the intro seems incomplete.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting. Oh, you know what? I can add to that. I'm not putting a news story in because I don't think we're going to get to one.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all good. Oh, perfect. Okay.
So, yes, Jeff Solomon, if you're looking through the show notes, we're doing some iTunes reviews. They've been redacted because I don't want you guys to see them before we get to them. So don't cheat.
All right. I was like, what's wrong with my computer? Everything's going wrong. Had to shave in the dark.
All right.
You missed your upper lip, dude.
Okay. All right. You guys all set?
Yes.
All right. Brent, it's your last chance to run. Otherwise,
I'm in too deep. I'm in.
All right. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Al Young from Four Roses Bourbon on the We Like Drinking podcast, where we all never drink alone.
At the sound of the tone, the official We Like Drinking time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 276 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing new iTunes reviews, and we'll be discussing and tasting some beautiful Four Roses bourbons with master distiller Brent Elliott. So crack open that beer, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking! Listeners, let me just warn you right off the bat. We got onto the video chat tonight, and John is bouncing up and down in his seat, so excited to talk to Brent Elliott tonight. He's like, hey, Brent, do you mind if we go extra nerdy tonight? Like, oh, man, let's do it. So buckle up, cowboys and cowgirls. It's going to be a John kind of story kind of night. So you have been warned.
Yeah, speaking of cows, tell a story.
Let me say cheers, my podcast freaky friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 276 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine and spirits education podcast focusing on fun. This week, bourbon. So, make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikedrinking.com/subscribe. All right, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got more to drink. So let's find out who we're with. We're joined by our usual panel members. We've got our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Mustachioed. Thank you. Hello.
Deeply mustachioed. We have our beautiful brewer and snake wrangler, John Ruyak.
Hi, folks. My wife wants me to open the vanilla. I probably shouldn't drink this, right?
What are you, Tom Hanks on Family Ties?
I don't think I can get it open.
And I am your host.
I can't get it open. Sorry.
I'm your host. That took 5 minutes. John, mute your line. I am your host, certified specialist wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week has been the master distiller for Four Roses Bourbon since September of 2015. He was named Master Distiller / Blender of the Year at the 2020 Icons of Whiskey America Award ceremony. This week, he raises it up a notch by joining us on the We Like Drinking podcast, in particular to talk about the distillery's newest permanent product line extension, added since 2006, Small Batch Select. Please help us welcome Brent Elliott. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. The fact that you're still here after having to listen and watch John try to open a bottle of live on air.
Hey, vanilla's vanilla's like 80 proof, isn't it?
I don't think it's that high.
I think it is.
All right.
Where are you going with that?
I don't know. I think my wife's making oatmeal cookies.
Thanks for joining us, Brent. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your late night to join us to talk about Four Roses and these wonderful bourbons that you guys have sent to us. We're going to let's taste let's taste before we do. Jeff, are you okay if we taste before we do? Yeah, let's lube up the brain a little bit before, because I really want to get in these. So listeners, we have two Four Roses bourbons here tonight. We have the Small Batch and we have the newly released Small Batch Select. Brent, help me out. Let me make sure I'm honest here. Small Batch Select was available in 3 states, and you're opening up 5 more states.
It was 5 states last year, or 5 markets, and this year we're adding, I believe, about 15 new markets.
Oh, okay. And that's states, or is that cities?
Nike videos for you.
Yeah, it's all new states.
Okay, so I'm very sorry. My wife just gave me crap because we've been doing weightlifting videos for the last 2 weeks and I couldn't open a bottle of vanilla. And she got it open. Sorry.
So, and have those states opened up already?
Some have. I don't think they're all open yet.
Okay.
This year, but by the end of the year, we'll be in. It's around 15 additional states.
That's awesome. So everybody can be looking for the Small Batch Select. Shall we start with the Small Batch and save?
I would say so. I typically like to work up in proof.
Okay. Yep. So the Small Batch, we're looking at 90 proof, a mingling of 6 and 7 year old bourbons. 90 proof. I was telling Brent and John before the show that I haven't consumed any of these, but I've been sniffing them for like 3 weeks because the smell on these things is just amazing. You can already. John, go ahead.
No, I was just. This is I don't know what to say about it. I've had the product before. I was talking to you before the show. We got these a couple weeks ago, and I was able, as a celebratory thing, I had a little taste of it with a friend of mine after a hike, and but I was just noticing that just the richness of the product itself. I had a bubble on the top of it that was just floating there for literally 15 minutes after I poured it in there. So it just kind of, to me, just kind of just solidified the richness that I already know is in the product because I've tasted it before. So, I mean, it's honestly, and these are my best whiskey glasses, some cut crystal. It glows in the glass. And the lighting in my room sucks. It just glows in the glass. It really does.
So Brent, what should we be looking at on the nose with this one?
With this one, you're going to get, everyone smells and tastes differently, but what I get, first I get fruit. I get a lot of nice, rounded, rich fruit, like red, ripe fruits. and then I get some of the spice in the background. A lot of it's from the rye. Some of it's from the yeast strain that we use in this one. We use 2 different yeast strains, and I'll get more into the details of that here in a bit. But with this one, we use our O yeast, which is very fruity, and the K yeast, which is spicy. And the mash bill on this one, since it utilizes both of our mash bills, it comes in about 27.5% rye. So you get a lot of that rye influence still.
Yep.
So it's just a nice balance. And then at 6 and 7 years old, there's still plenty of caramel and vanilla coming up to complement and mesh with those other complex flavors and aromas.
You talk about the spices. I get cinnamon in this. I get some definite cinnamon notes in this one.
Absolutely.
The fruity notes and the spicy notes and everything else.
Is
maintain the balance?
Is the expectation, because you talk about the age in reference to some oak characteristics, is the expectation that once it's in the bottle, it's going to hold those characteristics, or over time, as this might be in somebody's cabinet, in my cabinet, it might last a week, but in some folks' cabinets, maybe for years, is there going to be an evolution in flavor there as well?
There can be. If you have a half full bottle or a quarter full or just a drop left in it, the more volatile compounds, they're going to evaporate. They're going to be lost into the headspace, and that will change it. They'll kind of flatten it out, give it just, it's kind of a duller flavor. It doesn't ruin the whiskey in any way, but if you have a totally full bottle with very little headspace, it should stay the same indefinitely.
Nice.
Okay, so Brent, as a brewer, I make generally 16 different kinds of beer on tap at our brewery, and each one of those things ages a little differently. And I would like to see things consumed at a certain period of time. Fortunately, with the way beer tastes are, we know what those are, and the more highly hopped beers that have a lot of aromatics from the hops tend to be a little more popular, and they go faster. So that we don't have to worry about freshness so much. But for you, as the master distiller, when someone purchases a bottle of your product and they open it up a fifth, how quickly would you like someone to responsibly finish that bottle, given your thoughts on the volatility of some of the things?
I've never really done a study on it, but I've noticed, if I have a bottle sitting around that's a quarter full and I revisit it 6 months after I opened it, I'll see a difference. So it's not necessarily ruined, and it's not even, at 6 months, it's not so far off the mark that I would say it's outside the profile of what you'd expect. But I wouldn't recommend leaving a bottle a quarter full or just leaving that last little bit in there because you liked it so much. You try to hold on to it so tightly, you lose it. If you just sit on it for a year or so and then you revisit it, it's not going to be the same.
Okay, cool.
Jeff, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just, I had a little taste and it's wonderful, but all of a sudden I've got this, we're mostly beer and wine folks over here, and we enjoy spirits, but really it's, this is what really gets my gears turning. And I'm just thinking about, especially us wine folks, we love to just hold on to things forever. And I'm just thinking about this conversation right now, and I'm thinking like, gosh, the way to go is, if you love something that much, like this single barrel Four Roses bourbon that I've been holding on to for a little bit, I mean, I suppose what I should do is finish the rest real quick, buy a fresh one, and save that again for a later day, right? Like, it's just, to me, that's just really neat. I'd love to get into the tasting notes on this small batch though, because I just had a sip and it's delicious.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you're getting, Jeff?
Well, so and again, it is kind of that thing where it's like that as you're talking to each other, you're getting a little bit of an influence there. I was almost getting like a little bit of, and I've never really picked this out in a bourbon before, there was a little bit of red fruit on the palate, like right down the middle, like almost like some cranberry or cassis on there. And then as I got into the outer edges of the mouth, it was much more like orange rind to go along with some of those caramel notes, and spicy,
The rye
of
kicks
course.
in. Yeah.
So to me, my experience is pretty similar, but for me, it was a lot of spicy stuff. But we make one of my famous biscottis that I make is an orange chocolate biscotti, and we either use Grand Marnier or Cointreau. So for me, as the taste dissipated around my mouth, I got it reminded me a little bit more of Cointreau, which is an orange liqueur. So it kind of reminded me of that, and just all that nice rye spice and some caramel notes for me.
The caramel is what jumps out at me, and then the spice of the rye kicks in. Brent, how about you?
Yeah, I think any good spirit, you're going to see complexity. And when someone makes a suggestion, with something like this, usually it's there. Like you're saying citrus, I taste it now, I get the citrus. And there's no doubt that's in there. The caramel, vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
I think really what defines this one for me, though, is that fruit. And I think, Solomon, you hit it. The fruit isn't something you see at that level in most bourbons, but with the particular yeast strains that we use for this, through the fermentation, they actually create a lot of those flavors that even straight off the still, before it's aged or anything, you can smell that fruitiness. And that's really what defines this one for me. I get those rich, red, ripened fruits, and it really is unique in that way, I think.
Awesome. That is fantastic. And by the way, our buddy Stub is watching right now, and he was like, he's digging for the single batch, couldn't find it. His friends killed the single barrel just the other day, but he said the yellow label is his go-to when it comes to mixing cocktails. So he's really stoked about all this, and hecka jealous.
So are we calling him Stub, or are we calling him number 2 now?
Shall we move on to the small batch select?
Yeah.
All right.
Great, so if you guys are.
Another 6 and 7 year bourbon blend, 104 proof. The small batch select, available, maybe not to everybody quite yet, and we'll talk a lot more about this as the show goes on. I'm really interested to get your just hear the story of how this one came about. But first, for me, the nose on this one, it's so much more, and I don't mean this to sound callous towards the previous one, but this one smells so much more smooth, and there's a lot more of the caramel kind of flavors on this one and the vanilla, but just the smell is just, I don't know if smooth is a smell, but it's much more rounded kind of aroma on this one than the small batch.
Is it because of the proof, Brent? Do you think it's because of the alcohol that's evaporating and taking those volatile things with it that you get some extra stuff?
I don't know. Usually with the higher proof on the nose and the palate, if you compare it to something at a lower proof, usually that extra alcohol comes through as more intense or less smooth. But I know what you're saying here with this one, and that is, I think with this, it's something to do with the combination of the different recipes in this one. I think it's so rounded out that nothing really stands out. Like with the small batch, you get spice, it's very apparent. You get the fruit, very rich, very apparent. With this, I think this has 6 recipes. So I think none of them stand out entirely. I think they're more integrated, and that's probably how you're getting less of that impact, or what you're saying, more of the smoothness.
Okay.
I'm just sort of speculating there. But I know what you're saying. It has a little bit more of the richness, which could be, from not being chill filtered. So maybe some of those barrel notes come through in this one that from that process, they kind of give it more of that rounded, rich aged character. Because the age on this one is it's 6 and 7 year old barrels also, just the same as the small batch.
Yep.
So the difference really is the proof, the fact that it's non-chill filtered, and the recipes that we use in this one.
And you said there's 6 recipes in this one. How many are in the small batch?
The small batch is 4.
Okay.
4.
So I guess now is a good time to go ahead and explain this a little bit since I'll keep talking about it. We create 10 different recipes. And the way we do that is we start out with 2 mash bills or 2 grain recipes. And both of them are pretty high in rye. One is extremely high. It's 35% rye. The other is 20%. The high rye mash bill is a B mash bill. The low rye is the E. And then on top of those, either one of those mash bills, we ferment with one of 5 different yeast strains. And each of these yeast strains has been isolated and utilized because of the different flavors that each one creates. So we have one that's very rich and fruity, which is the one that was one of the recipes in the small batch. We have the V, which is a more delicate fruit, and that's what you'll find in the single barrel. You have the K, which is spicy, and that's also in the small batch, and that's also in the small batch select. And then we have a Q, which is kind of floral, and an F, which is herbal and kind of minty, and that one's also in the small batch select.
Okay. And that if somebody's looking at it, that's all the OB SVs and everything else for each one of the recipes they're using.
That's why it's important to have the book.
Yep.
That's right. I'll book will explain every bit of it.
Yeah, and I'm using it as a reference here. And I'll get to that as far as the smoothness. I've got some questions about fermentation temperatures and things like that when we get to our interview.
So what do you think of the aroma, John or Jeff?
Oh, when you said you smelled cinnamon in the small batch, I knew from when I was tasting it during another podcast I was doing that the select is just pounding with cinnamon and spicy notes on the nose. Just like to me it's cinnamon, maybe something a little even warmer than that, maybe some allspice or nutmeg or something like that in there as well. That's what I get.
And Solomon.
Yeah, for me, like it's just I know Jeff, you were talking about how it smells kind of smooth, and I get that because things are very much like rounded out. There's a lot of like complementary pieces there. For me, I smell power. Right? Like this is your first nose into any booze is going to be a little hot, but the first one on this is to singe your nose hairs, and then the second one is to get into the deeper notes there. But it's like it's this beautiful power. I mean, a lot of times we don't talk about alcohol as being like this particular flavor component, but like it's actually really nice and really pleasant, like a good like smack in the face to go with, to me, what's a lot more like the cinnamon, like the spice that they're talking about, the more mellowed out caramel notes on this, and more citrus than red fruit on the nose. But yeah, this is a hard-hitting beast.
I never got that singed nose hairs thing when I first opened it up. So
you got to stick it in like further, like just get in there.
You need to mark your face with the glass. You need to get it so far in there. All right, should we taste this one up?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know what it is? You're talking about spices. And what's coming out to me, I hear the cinnamon, but what's coming out to me is almost like a peppermint situation. Like a candy cane on steroids. But like along with, there's this sweetness of the corn that's there. There's that spicy rye and just those smooth out caramel notes. and it's just beautifully warm. I'm being hugged on the inside right now. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, if the nose hairs didn't get singed on the aroma, the nose hairs will get singed on the first taste, because it you really get that heat. But yeah, I was thinking like a pininess, but I think peppermint is an even better descriptor of that spice that's coming through on the initial hit. That's a palate experience though all around. Damn, John.
Yeah, when Solomon's talking about candy canes and I'm just taking a sip of it, I like go, holy shit, yeah, that's it. Just a little bit of oak. I like the vanilla. I love the vanilla, but listeners of the show, my palate's 4 or 5 components. That's about what I get. My palate's not that sophisticated, but I know what I like, and I like that.
And so, Brent, what are you getting on this select?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you guys are speaking. You're talking about peppermint, because for me, mint is really one of the dominant flavors I get in this one, and that's a direct result of that F yeast strain.
Yep.
It's kind of herbal, kind of minty, and with this one, I get all that complexity: the vanilla, the caramel. The fruit is a lot different from the small batch. The fruit in this one, I get more of like a light pear, apricot, those kinds of fruits. And they're not very upfront, but they're in there. They're more mid palate and sort of hold on the finish. What really, when I think of this one, I think of the gravity or the density it has on my palate. It really immediately coats my palate, and the finish is just so long. It's just so dense.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that I think, when I think candy cane is an underestimation. I mean, it's a suggestion, but when you let it finish, it goes to something earthier where you actually ate like a peppermint or a spearmint leaf rather than having that flavor from a candy. It's an actual. It seems like it is. It's a natural flavor rather than something derived for like candy to me. I mean, it just kind of mellows out, and you get a little earth to it on my palate after you've just let it linger for a bit.
Good call on that. I am just wondering here. Wait, those things exist in nature?
You're right. The finish on this is just all night long. It just continues to just evolve and hang out and tickle the tongue a little bit. So man, fantastic job. Congratulations. Congratulations.
I'm very sad.
Did you kill it?
All gone.
It's yeah. I can get it by mail, can I? I'm in New Mexico and I'm sad. Okay.
And it should be available sometime soon in New Mexico.
It'll be Colorado.
It is going to be in Colorado. I know. I saw it's in Colorado. So
road trip, John.
All right. Thank you for sending these samples to us. This is fantastic. All batch select, folks. Be on the lookout for it. Is this your first signature? No, you've had multiple blends that you released before, but this is the first permanent ad.
Yeah, first permanent. Yeah, actually the first we've done since 2006. 2006 was the small batch. Okay. So we waited quite a while. So this is the first that I did all the blending for this, and this is the first permanent release that is really from my palate, my blending. Yes.
Well done, sir.
Kudos.
Thank you.
It's amazing, and my bottle's empty now too. All right. So now that we've got that, we've got our palates, we've finely tuned for the rest of the show. Let's get our brain in the same space with a little bit we like to call
Wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference. This is where I am going to give these fine folks a term, and you fine folks listening at home, watching live every Wednesday night at welikedrinking.com/show. As I give this term, all you got to do is let me know. Is this a wine term, a beer term, a spirit term, or some sort of pop culture reference? The term this week is sensible.
Whoops. Say it again.
Sensible. Is sensible a wine, a beer, a spirit, or a pop culture reference? John Rudak.
Mr. Solomon, can
Yes.
you spell that for us, please?
Censcibel. Sensible.
Well, it says sensible. At first, I thought it was some sort of like off-model Buick, like Bonneville or something like that. I wasn't sure, so I was going with pop culture as sensible. I'm gonna say this is a spirit term, and it has something to do with some sort of yeast thing that happens when fermenting a corn mash.
John Rudak says that sensible is a spirit term that has something to do with the fermentation of corn mash. I may as well just go straight over to Brent. What do you think sensible is?
I have no idea, so I'm going to have to use my deductive skills. I know the least about wine, so I'm going to go with it's a wine term.
Interesting. I like the idea of using deduction to slump into what the answer is. Jeff Eckel, what do you think sensible is?
Well, using our deductive skills, we and knowing Jeff Solomon. Jeff Solomon, Brent, I don't know if you know, Jeff Solomon is a big fan of the National Football League. And they recently had their thing where they pick players from college and they put them on their teams. I think they call it a draft or something like that. And I'm guessing since Jeff Solomon was having to scroll through his phone when he was joining us to come up with to do his homework right before class starts, I think this is going to be a pop culture reference. And I'm going to say that Sensible is the last name of the last player drafted in the NFL draft.
Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant. Like Tom Brady? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it is interesting. I do see that our friend Jason in the comments is wondering if this is an island off of Florida. Could be. My goodness. Brent Elliott, you know how to play the game. Sensible is, in fact, a wine term. Sensible is a black-skinned grape indigenous to Spain, and it is a synonym for everybody tempranillo.
Whoa!
Sensible.
Well done, Mr. Elliott. Well done. All right, good one, Jeff. Okay, we've gotten through everything that we've gotten through. Let's get to the interview portion of the show, Brent. So I'm really curious how a chemist becomes a master distiller for a Kentucky bourbon distillery.
Well, it all started. I didn't start out as a master distiller. I started out in 2005. I was living in Tennessee. I'm from Kentucky, and I've always, as a Kentuckian, been proud of Kentucky bourbon. I've known about it, but I was actually on a trip with my wife back to Kentucky one weekend, and we took a tour of Woodford Reserve. And we just got married, just bought a house. So we had our lives all planned out. Everything was good down in Tennessee. And And that's when it occurred to me that certainly they needed chemists to make whiskey because, whether it's biology or whatever it was, it's the fundamental level, there's chemistry behind making whiskey. And it was the very next day we got back to Nashville, and I found a position online with Four Roses. And I didn't know what Four Roses was at the time because they had just come back to the U.S. just a few years prior to that as a bourbon whiskey. And so I applied, came up, interviewed, and fell in love with the place, the people, the bourbon. And then I just started, working quality control. I was doing analytics for first year or so, and I started getting more involved in the blending. And then we were really, we'd just come back to the U.S., so we had a very small staff to support production, U.S. sales, marketing, everything. So I really just kind of pitched in anywhere I could, from production, bottling, distillery, everything. There was room for someone to help just about everywhere. And so really, I was just fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time with the right company, and I just grew with the company. Mm. And then in 2015, when Jim Rutledge, he had been in the industry 49 years, and he's an absolute icon in the industry. Well, he decided to retire, and I was shocked by that first, but then I was even more shocked when they said, Jim's retiring and you're going to be his replacement.
What?
Happy Tuesday.
And they said, Jim isn't retiring for another 6 weeks or so you can't tell anyone.
Wow.
I said, okay, I guess I won't tell anyone. Just the biggest news I'd ever heard, but I couldn't share it with anyone.
That's incredible. So roughly how many people were working there when you started in 2005?
There were people in like the administration building, like in quality control. We had one person who did all sales and marketing. There were two of us that were the quality department. We had the master distiller. We had a chief operating officer, a distillery manager who was Al Young at the time. There were less than 10 of us in Lawrenceburg outside the distillery. Now, the distillery, that always, it basically runs on 2 speeds off and on. And we've expanded now, so it's a little different. So that didn't change for many years. But as far as administration, quality control, sales, we were just a skeleton crew. There were less than 10 of us at the time.
Wow. And roughly how many are there today?
Between both facilities, temporary and like around 150.
Wow. Okay.
So
yeah, you really have grown with the company that whole time. How do you think that chemistry background really helped you in the whole in your whole career here at Four Roses?
I think, well, on the quality control side, especially in production, chemistry has just about everything to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I think, besides the fact my foot got in the door just from running instruments, I had expertise and a lot of experience in running a GC mass spec, and that's really what got my foot in the door. And it helped me to it helps me to understand a lot of the flavors that I'm seeing or talking about, and I've always enjoyed explaining that. And I think that really helped pave the way, because really the modern distiller now, it's sort of split. I've got my job, the job where I'm at work doing work, and then I have the job where I'm traveling or talking to you guys. And I think my chemistry background really helped me out, prepared me for that, because I've always been curious about how things work. I've always liked to explain how things work. And so it's kind of natural that I like to get geeky and talk about the flavors in whiskey or why the flavors are there. So I think it's helped me out both, in more of the talking to people and educating people at every level about whiskey. And of course, it's helped me in the lab, in the distillery, and in every aspect of quality control and production in the distillery.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to make you wait, John. Jeff Solomon. Oh, okay.
Well,
right, hold on. John's dying. Okay, John.
No, I just, before we get really into step stuff, and this is a broader question, which will help us get to another point somewhere in a couple minutes. But I mean, obviously, with your chemistry background, there's this nuts and bolts thing. And when I was in Costa Rica brewing, when we first opened the brewery in Costa Rica, I said, okay, we've got the science down. Now we have to work on the art. When did you see that shift for yourself?
Pretty early on, especially because I got involved in liquid evaluation of smelling, tasting early on. And that's when I realized that the science and the understanding, the processes, the software, the technology, that only gets you so far when you're working with a natural product, because there's always some portion of that that is out of our control. And to try to control that outside the scope of technology or chemistry or science, that's where you really have to start employing the art of it. And that's really, and it's ironic because, you know, my background is science and I like to have hard answers, but I think really the most fascinating and interesting part is the art side of making whiskey.
All right, Jeff.
Well, John Ruyak butted in and basically stole my question. So,
oh yeah, excuses.
Piggybacking off of that, right? We've got this art of blending things together and making things work, and also knowing that we're dealing with this live product that's infinitely complex, and yet you've got this whiskey house that has like this distinct flavor profile. Do you find yourself over the years having to switch up recipes, like in terms of like how you're blending to get the same type of result for a small batch? Like, does that blend change over time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Actually, that is the reason originally we used the 10 recipes. It's because we don't have ultimate control over every barrel or every batch that comes out. But when we have that entire range of different batches, different recipes to utilize, we can blend them to make a consistent flavor. Or in the case of like the small batches, to pull different recipes out to create a different flavor. So we use them for consistency and uniqueness.
Is there a time sometimes when you just pull a recipe and go, whoa, we should just release this just the way it is right here, right now?
Yes. And fortunately, we have a few outlets for batches like that. One is our private barrel program, and that's where batches like that will end up. And that's where retailers can come in. They can actually select their own barrel from any of the recipes. So we'll put a batch like that into that program, or we'll take a batch like that and set it aside and let it age to between 10 and however many years and use it for a limited release, like a limited edition small batch.
So how much would it cost me to buy one of those barrels?
If you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. So it's really interesting. Jeff Solomon and I were at the Wine Bloggers Conference a few years ago, and they did a class on blending wines, and it's always such a unique experience to see the evolution of what you're creating and how you get the notes of each wine in it and build what it is that you're looking for. So I'm curious, like with the small batch and going forward with the small batch select, I know this is the first one. Is this one of the scenarios where you're looking for consistency, or are you looking for something unique every year that just kind of comes to you through the tasting process?
Well, with these small batches, like the small batch select, when I was blending that up, it was absolutely trying to find something different, something unique, something that set itself apart from all the others. But now that that profile is established, our goal is to keep it consistent now.
Okay.
The the limited editions, we do a small batch, same concept, but it's limited. We do about 13,000 bottles in the U.S. once a year. And with that one, it's the same concept using different batches to create something new. But that's where we try to showcase to do something totally different each year.
Okay.
Okay.
All
So
right. Here we go, Jim.
so just along that vein, I mean, as a brewer, and I mean, this is a living product to the point where you get it to the distillery. It's a living product, and as a brewer, I do my best to make every single run of the honey pale ale the same. But some batches turn out better than others. Is that okay with you?
It is okay. And again, it goes back to we can do everything exactly the same. And sometimes it is frustrating that you can't hit that mark every time. But at the same time, it's interesting because it brings the art into it. And we go so far as to even our warehouses, they're single storage so that they're not super high. You don't get a lot of temperature variation from the bottom to the top.
Oh, cool.
And it's all to try to control that consistency. But because we're dealing with weather, grains, the temperatures, both during the production and especially during the aging, and there's so many countless variables that go into it that we see the same thing. Every batch, every barrel is not going to be the same. No matter what we do, no matter how much we monitor it, control it, the technology we have at our disposal, there's always going to be a variation. And it's both. It's frustrating. You kind of want to have that control, but since it's impossible, and it kind of is what makes it so interesting, you kind of have to embrace it. And
yeah. I mean, and it's nice to be able to say, hey, you pull a regular aside and say, look, dude, this batch is really good. But I want to kind of get back to a little bit more nuts and bolts because we haven't had a master distiller on before, and I know you're not really maybe on the floor and part of the mashing process all the time, but when you're mashing, you're essentially making corn beer per se.
Uh-huh.
When you first pitch do the different yeast strains take a different amount of time to finish the fermentation from the original mash down to the finished pre-distilled product?
They all generally hit their endpoint about the same time, about 84 hours, give or take. But what we do see is they all take off at a different rate. Some are a little more aggressive, some a little more sluggish. Just the onset. And
the fermentation curve is a little different, but they all take about the same amount of time.
Yeah, they all get to the end point about the same time, but the curve is different. And that's
so.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So let's just pretend we're making this corn beer. What's the original gravity or the Play-Doh on the mash as you pitch it? As you pitch the yeast?
We're low 20s. It's a little different depending on mash bill.
Okay, and then the final gravity is
we go balling, but yeah,
balling, and so that's close to Play-Doh. So that ends up where at 10 or 12?
No, lower than that. We get pretty thorough utilization of our sugars.
Wow. So you have an over 85% attenuation rate out of your yeast then.
Yeah, we pretty much we get pretty full attenuation. We don't have full conversion of all the starch, but we're pretty close, and we're within like 2 to 4%.
So what you're essentially taking is a corn beer that's somewhere around 9%, and then you're taking it to the distilling column?
Yeah, we actually we have a two-step distillation. We go through a beer column, and we come off that at about 132 proof, about 132 proof. And then we go from there to a doubler, which is a second distillation. And we come off that typically about 140 proof.
Nice. There's something I want to just jump back to. I should have, when Solomon was talking about doing the nose on the small batch selects, and he was talking about, burning your nose hairs, and I never got that. And a lot of times you get that kind of burn if you get higher alcohols in it. Are you controlling your mash? Are you controlling your fermentation temperatures in order to keep those higher alcohols out of the system and just doing a more level thing that just keeps the lower alcohols in the product?
Yeah, absolutely. We set all of our mashes at either 66 or 67, depending on the external temperature and how the fermentation profiles are running. And we stop it. We control it once it hits 90. We have cooling coils inside each one of the fermenters. It's just a simple, just a feedback loop. And typically, even some of the slower yeast strains, 90% of the time will hit 90 degrees within 48 hours. And then from 48 till the end, which is mid 80 hour range, they'll be maintained at 90.
Right. So you're keeping the higher alcohols out of it. So that's really what burns your noses or might give you a headache and things of that nature. So that's what keeps your bourbon so nice and smooth.
Jeff Solomon, you look like you got something you wanted to.
Well, I love yeast, and I was wondering, do you ever play around with like wild fermentation with the corn, or like does it even start wild before you inoculate?
Not intentionally, but we do realize that all of our fermenters are totally open. So there are certainly microbes that are housed up, in our buildings that, they certainly get in. How much they influence, I can't say. It may be nothing, but we recognize that could somehow influence what the Four Roses character is. So like when we just expanded, we didn't want to leave anything to chance. It would have been much cheaper to have expanded on the back of our property or at some new distillery. But what we did is we basically just tore out a wall and expanded our fermentation room.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so these are all wide open fermenters. So, I can't say that there's not wild yeast that gets in there. It certainly does, just whether or not it really plays a role in the final flavor or not.
Cool. And then just thinking about flavors, I would have to imagine, especially like getting into the art of like blending things. I love having my beverages with some food, and I was wondering if you could maybe give us some quick tips, some actionable advice if people wanted to start pairing bourbon with foods. Like, what type of foods would you guide people towards?
I always have a hard time with that because I'll have my bourbon before dinner and then after. But I end up doing tastings a lot where I am pairing, and I have found that I enjoy sort of the obvious. I like chocolate with bourbon. Sometimes they complement each other well, and red meat I think always works well with bourbon for me.
Nice. And what about cigars? Does that work?
It does for me. So I'm not a big cigar smoker, but I've tried it a few times, mixing the two, and it does. It's enjoyable, and to a point. Then I kind of get it's too much burn. I go numb.
Then you have the
I can see the appeal. I mean, you get a lot of interesting notes once they're together that you don't get independently.
Yeah,
and different cigars, different bourbons, they mesh differently, and it is interesting, and I enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking the thing about cigars is like it's great, but then you have 5/6 of it left, and you just want to throw it away.
If you had a really good Cuban cigar, you wouldn't be throwing any of it away.
And then my friends in California were asking, does it pair well with the ganja?
John, did you have anything else you wanted to get into here?
No, I think those were the big things. I mean, Now, for Kentucky bourbon, the barrels can only be used once. Is that correct?
Yes.
The aging barrels?
Yeah, for straight bourbon whiskey.
Okay, so I forget. I think we talked to Al about this. Do you have on-site cooperage, or are you purchasing barrels from somebody else?
We purchase them elsewhere. Independence Dave. And
Okay,
they provide, they're the biggest. So they supply it to a lot of people.
okay. Do they produce barrels to your specifications?
Yes.
And are they char them to your direction and things like that? I mean, nice.
Yeah, you specify. Yeah, you can specify exactly how much char you want, and that will obviously affect the flavor, the color.
Do you do different chars throughout a run, or do you stick with a single thing for a particular recipe?
We stay consistent for all of our recipes. It's like a level 4 char, and that's all we've ever used.
So
Cool.
I had a really interesting conversation with a coworker this week, actually. They were asking, they're not a big whiskey drinker or bourbon drinker, and they were asking, I want to have some bottles or a bottle. John, can you stop? John, can you stop with the paper rattling?
Sorry.
He was asking if I want to have a good bottle under $40. What is a good American bourbon or whiskey I can get? And I directed them to your small batch and small batch select. But I'm curious if in that scenario, that same question to you, somebody who's not a bourbon drinker, but they want to have a really good, solid bourbon around the house for when guests come over, $50 or less. What are you pointing them to?
If it's not Four Roses?
No, it can be Four Roses.
Oh.
It can absolutely be Four Roses.
I would probably the small batch.
Okay.
I think it's just so approachable. At 90 proof, the select and even the single barrel at 100 proof. Some people might be it might be a little much for some people, but I think the delicate, easy drinking nature of the small batch, it being 90 proof, I think it's just well rounded. I think a lot of people I've had a lot of people out doing tastings that don't think they like bourbon, because the image of bourbon is a lot different than the reality. But still, people have that in the back of their mind. They expect that burn, that bite, and so I find myself reaching for the small batch to really demonstrate that that's the wrong impression. Okay. And more often than not, it really seems to work. It really seems to reach people. What I'm trying to get across because it's so smooth.
Excellent. All right, guys. One last question before we get out of here. Jeff Solomon.
Is Sensibel a wine term? I'm just having so much fun just tasting, and I feel especially so lucky when we have folks coming in here and talking to us about stuff that we're not as knowledgeable about. It's just been an awesome experience. So I'm just really happy to sit here and enjoy listening to you, Brent. Like this is great. Wow. And this bourbon is fantastic.
Well, I'll attest to that since both my bottles are empty. But no, I guess I wanted to just maybe touch back on the distillation thing. As you've got the small batch that's 90 proof, and the select that's 104. What was this? Strictly because of the blending process that you came up with those different proof designations or results, I should say. I mean, I don't think you would initially set out to say, "Oh, we're going to make a select that's 104 proof." That's just the way That's just the way it ended up after you did your blending.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a long answer. With the small batch. I was pretty new when we came out with that, but I seem to recall, we had an 80 proof on the market. We had 100 proof. So that was kind of right in the middle. With the small batch select, it was kind of somewhere in between the flavor profile and the chemistry behind it. Because with this one, we knew before we knew the proof, we knew that we wanted it to be non-chill filtered. Now, the whole reason we chill filter is because some of these compounds in the barrel at high proof, at 120 proof, which is our entry proof, once all those extracts from the barrel are in solution, they stay in solution at high alcohol. You start adding water, they start to haze out, solidify, precipitate, and sometimes it doesn't happen until that bottle's been sitting on the shelf for a couple weeks. So because of that, and especially if you cool it down, so we knew that around 100 proof, that was the breaking point. You go up above that, you don't have to chill filter to pull those compounds out. It's going to stay stable and in solution. But we just kind of picked a point to do our freezer test. They weren't very technical. We just cut some samples at 104, put them in the freezer, and while those were sitting there, I was working on the test blends and just kind of started working at, I think I was at like 104 to 110. And that's kind of I really like that range, like 107, 108. That's probably more often than not with some aged barrels. That's my favorite spot. But 104 was just where I was working with the test blends. And once the final profile was established at 104, I tried it at some other proofs, and they were higher proofs. And 104 was really just the perfect spot for it. And the tests came back, they were all stable. So 104 sounded good and tasted good, and it was stable. So we went with 104.
One last question, and I've
keep them coming. I don't care.
Okay, so we have some friends at that winery up in Dixon, New Mexico, and we spent a whole day with them one time, and they described Jesse and his brother Chris. They have fun on blending day. What's blending day like at Four Roses Distillery?
We have a lot of blending days.
And they all kind of blend together, right?
They do. And they're all fun because every one of our products, except single barrel, and that's actually more work goes into selecting single barrels and improving those than the blends of the others probably. But every product we have, whether it's Four Roses Bourbon, small batch select, or one of our exports, those formulas, those blending formulas have to be redone every 3, 4, 5 months at most. Because one, the batches that were used to blend them have aged that much longer, so they've changed. So it's always a moving target. So we're always pulling samples, blending, mingling, trying to maintain that consistency.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's a big part of what I do. And it's probably, I really love that part of it. My favorite is doing the limited editions I was talking about earlier, or doing something like small batch select, because it's fun to blend to consistency, but to just pull all the barrels from the warehouse and just the best batches and just start throwing test blends together. And that's fun. That's the most fun I have every year.
So this is probably the toughest question you're going to answer, but as a brewer, this happens sometimes. Do you ever lose your palate and just say, I got to walk away from this and come back in a couple days and reset things and say, I'm just not tasting this right. I know it's better than this. Do you ever just need to just like take a break and say, look, I'm wrecked? And it's not about being intoxicated. It's just like your palate is just shot.
Yeah, it's for spirits. It's almost an everyday thing. Especially if I'm looking at samples at full strength.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times I'll look at things at full strength and dilute them to 20%, just because at barrel strength, all those flavors and the alcohol so high that everything's kind of locked up really tightly and it's hard to see everything in it. So I'll cut them to 20%. And that doesn't fatigue me too much. But at full strength, if I'm actually tasting, it's one sip and I'll usually like walk away for 5 or 10 minutes and then come back. But I also have days like that, off days. And fortunately we have a panel. So if we're looking at distill or things that have to be done every day, there's a team of people that we all rely on each other and each other's palates, and we all know each other's strengths and weaknesses. Like for example, I can't smell acetic acid very well. I think I like vinegar too much. I like sour foods, and I don't know if I've killed all those taste buds, but I know who has a good nose and palate for acetic acid, so I can go grab her and say, "Hey, is this acidic? Are you getting some sour notes off this?" Or yeah, everyone has their strengths on our tasting panel, so it all works out. So I definitely have those off days if I've got sinuses going on or a cold, and I'm useless.
So, Brent, at the end of a long tasting and blending session, when you get home, and as delicious as this bourbon is, when the last thing you want is another splash of bourbon, what's typically in your glass?
I enjoy beer a lot.
Any particular style or brand?
I kind of I drift all over the place. I like right now, and that's just because it's getting a little warmer out. I'm simple. Well, I'm simple, but I'm very picky. I like fresh and well made pilsners, lagers, even like Helles or some of the more bright, crisp beers. Of course, I like IPAs, and I don't like the ones that are just so overly hopped that they're for the sake of the hoppiness. But there are plenty of IPAs I like. But I think I kind of burned myself on those. I'm starting to get back into those now too. But
I get it. I totally get it. A straightforward, just crisp, like it doesn't have to be above 7% to be delicious type of situation.
Right. I'm looking for refreshing and crisp and clean. That's it. And as a brewer, that's the hardest thing to find. Probably the hardest thing to make are those light beers, because anything that goes wrong, it's right there. It's on a white screen.
Yeah.
All right.
They don't last long in the can. They don't last long in the bottle.
So can I get your take on this real quick? Because this last December, it was all the rage. Everybody got the German beer advent calendar, and it was essentially Pilsner for 24 straight days. Do you agree with us here? Like all German beers taste exactly the same. Can you say that?
Just paint him into a corner, Solomon.
I don't know. I'd almost have to taste them, fresh in Germany. They all kind of taste old to me here, and if I ever get a German beer in a bottle, so I typically don't.
All right, Brent, thank you so much for participating in our long interview portion. We knew it was going to go long. It was going to be a lot of nerdy questions tonight. I know it's late there. It's pushing midnight. If you got to go, you're welcome to go. Otherwise, we probably got 10 or 15 minutes left in the show if you want to stick around.
I'm sticking around.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, we don't get to do these very often, but I'm excited about it tonight. Let's get into iTunes reviews. I'll be honest, I had this redacted from the guys so they couldn't see it. So Jeff Solomon, do you want to go ahead and take the first iTunes review?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm seeing this right now. So Townie in Colorado says, fun show, 5 stars. I'm cheating because I know 2 of the 3 clowns and won 2 of the early giveaways, but the show is a lot of fun. Lots of down-to-earth knowledge without sounding like dicks. Cali Jeff is clearly the smartest because he's a giant AM49ers fan. I recently started from the beginning, and I'm 84 episodes in, have found each one entertaining. Keep it up, guys. Dude, thank you so much, Townie. You made my century. That's amazing.
Townie is a guy we used to play hockey with, and he's a relentless Michigan Wolverine 49er. and Giants fan.
And Detroit Red Wings for some strange reason.
So
Come
he's
on,
obviously
Townie, get with it.
He's very smart, very handsome, very eloquent. Way to go, Townie. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All the things. We have a second iTunes review. Alexandra WPB says, so much fun. 5 stars. The podcast is the best. My husband and I look forward to listening every Friday night. Thank you so much, Alexandra. We love hearing from you and everybody else that listens to the show. John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nah.
Just taking a deep breath. Awesome.
Yeah, just a heavy sigh.
All right. If we've got the iTunes reviews, we're pushing midnight for some of our guests. It must be time to call.
Last call.
Last call. Time to clean house and lock the doors. You know what we do here, folks? We're looking for a little bit of help from you. John Riek, if the folks want to follow us on social media, how can they do so?
Do that. Follow us at Twitter. That's We Like Drinking 1, the numeral 1. Instagram is We Like Drinking, and our private Facebook group known as The Tavern. Share all your pics about food and beer and wine and spirits, and pictures of flowers and doing all your weird lockdown shit.
And how do they get to the tavern?
Oh, that's WeLikeDrinking.com/tavern.
Got it. 276 episodes. He gets it. Brent, not to put you on the spot, but if the folks want to follow Four Roses or yourself, if you're on any of them, where can they find them on social media?
Of course, we've got the website, fourrosesbourbon.com, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us on all of those.
And are you on any of the social media platforms, or are you like, screw that?
I'm
stuff?
not.
Okay.
No.
Smart man.
Solomon, if the folks want to be like Townie and talk about how great you are, where can they do so?
Well, look, if you've been working on a review for a while, Chelsea, just go ahead and take a look at your phone, scroll down to where you see the empty 5 stars, poke that mofo, type up the best. It's tough to beat what Townie said, but the best and frankly honest review of our show. We'd love to hear you. It really helps us make the show better, or at least it makes us smile. So isn't that what it's all about?
Absolutely.
Especially if you're a freeloader and you're not giving us money on Patreon, you may as well leave a review.
And as Jeff mentioned, if you're looking to help us out financially a little bit, you can donate to the show by visiting WeLikeDrinking.com/pledge, get extra shows, get guacamole recipes, beer recipes, all kinds of fun stuff by checking us out for as little as $1 a month. You can also find the show notes for this episode with the links to the stories or mentions we had at WeLikeDrinking.com/episode. All right, man, that was a bourbon-soaked, fun adventure. But we've reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around the table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
I don't do this very often, but I just have like South Indiana corn just pouring out of every pore of my body right now. And seriously, folks, I mean, I don't do this very often, but get some of this small batch select. It's really just special stuff.
Jeff Solomon.
Yeah, I would say definitely buy the small batch select. I think it's really sensible.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Brent,
some things you just can't stop.
Brent, any final thoughts before we let you get out of here?
I'd just like to thank you guys for including me tonight, and appreciate all the kind words. I'm glad you guys like the small batch select, and invite you all to visit us anytime. Just come see us in Kentucky. I'll show you around. We'll taste through all the different recipes. Have a good time. But cheers, guys. Thanks.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking time to join us on the show tonight. I know you are a busy person and burning up a couple hours of your night to hang out with us is really appreciated. And as the other guys mentioned, fantastic job on the first release since 2006. This is an excellent bourbon, and folks really should check it out if they get a chance. So thanks again for joining us. And with that, I'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast.
Where you'll never drink alone.
Lordy. All right. Man, thank you so much, Brent. That was awesome. That was a lot of fun. I hope you had fun on the show.
I had a great time. Thanks, guys.
God, these are good. So I will get links out sometime tomorrow.
Cody Fuller said that he's gonna double his patron donation as long as I keep the mustache.
All right, so Brent, look for a follow-up email from me tomorrow, and then the show will drop live on Friday.
Okay, sounds great.
All right,
Look
thanks.
forward to watching.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
All right,
Very much appreciated.
Take care, guys.
night.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right, Patreon or viewers, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm looking for it, Cody. You go double it. Jeff will keep the beard. Is that locked in, Jeff Solomon?
What I mean, what he said, yeah.
Okay.
What he said locked in.
All right. Thanks, viewers. We'll talk to you next week.